Hello, I want to tell you my opinion about Rick, the new merchant. He is a speed DPS shield driver who has nice passive buffs, one of which greatly benefits from having a lot of BP. He also has wind skills which copy his spear skills for some reason. You can look at his skills in more detail if you pause. What are his strong sides? Or why you'll want to give him a place in your team? The unique passives. I've looked through the character index and not a single character increases the cap for passive physical attack for the whole front row. He himself gives 15% passive physical attack for front row. As a nice bonus, he also gives protection, which I heard is rare, HP and SP regen. Basically his gimmick, you'll want to keep your BP topped up, for that you'll need to use a skill which gives him BP regen effect and which restores his BP for hits. That way he by himself can restore at least 2 BP in a turn by himself. Single target spear damage move 6x70 potency, 420 total potency. Potency could be better comparing 720 potency moves or audio and substances have, but with higher physical attack cap and damage cap up I guess you can compensate for it. Priority AoE 4-hit moves, which also boost attack or elemental attack and damage by 15% if you max boost them. They also have small potency, so this should not be used for damage. He also has an AoE debuff for physical and magical attack. That's basically it. He'll also get some new skills in the future, but he won't benefit too much from them because of his kit, unless they get changed for global. One his skill is restore and dodge skill for front row, which is neat but needs to be max boosted, and the other one restores BP and buffs him. The new passive skill will no doubt be adjusted in some way we can't really predict yet. Now, considering all that, when would you want to take him in your team? Single enemy weak to spear or several enemies, one of which is weak to spear and the last one is weak against a different physical weakness. For example, like Hell level 100 Crack Spear Duo or Master Tower Floor 12. You can hit Book with Nefty or Light with Sancentus or Eldrica. In these battles, Rick's potential is fully utilized. Multiple spear weak enemies is sort of fine too, but you should rather choose another damage type, since Rick doesn't do AoE damage. I guess he can also find place in a long fight, when you want to turtle and benefit from passive protection and regen, but once again, easy fight has spear weakness. In these fights he can take the roles of damage dealer, spear and wind shield shaver, breaker, buffer and debuffer, but he'd be doing all of it in a fast manner, which brings me to my next point. Rick also has wind skills, what's up with them? Irrelevant skills absolutely. They share the properties of his speed skills, but Rick isn't a magic DPS, and his abilities don't play into magic at all. Also, wind is an irrelevant damage type, or so it seems to me so far. You'd want to take these skills only if it's a fight where you deal physical damage, but can also shield shade through wind skills, so that Rick would be doing at least something useful. And that's an incredibly niche scenario. And there is no point in bringing him to a magical team because his passive is useless there. His priority break skills are too simple for this stage of the game too. His passives don't support it like Sol's passive rest downs on break for example, and it takes a break turn. Like even Lars or Raz gets a sword rest down in the future and he's a general pull unit. Also in the AoE scenarios Rick won't be doing damage, and in single target scenarios you'd rather bring Solon for breaking. Vluda is a better AoE breaker, even if your condition is harder to meet, because you don't spend an action during break turn. Basically, if you'd want to break with Rick, you'd need to give him accessories for on-break effects, and you'll sacrifice his damage, which you don't want to do. Unless a battle has spear weak enemies, Rick won't be useful enough to warrant his place in a team, and he won't be that good for spear teams too actually. He would be decent of course, but with newer and upcoming units, his attack cap up and damage cap up passive won't be fully utilized. Like, let's go through the spear DPS we have now and we'll get in the future. Olberic. Yeah, I like Olberic, so he's in the list. But he is actually decent if you don't mind restarting a battle for battle luck, and it's a short battle. The moment we get an RNG engine anything to force 5 hits from him, he'd be of great use against single enemy. That aside, he is one of the few characters to fully utilize Rique's passive. He'd benefit greatly from both increased attack cap and damage cap if you summon him. You won't really bring him if you have someone better, unless you also need to tank or hit sword. Cecily is good and would be even better in the future, so she's an okay pair for Rique. If only he had AoE damage skills, that is. Cecily can only do damage and shield shave a little. Blue Dye is okay at damage dealing, but she mainly shield shaves. All 3 mentioned units are the weakest at the moment of the relevant units, but thanks to their multi-hits they get more out of Rique's passive. They are also all general pool units, so you probably have 1 or 2 of them. Situation with the other units is worse. Krauser is a memory unit, whose strongest move is 2 times hit essentially. He would benefit only from the damage cap up and ram the new cap still. Roland's main role is debuffer. It's not easy to buff him properly for damage because he likes being in the back row, so you won't really rely on him for damage. Leon is a Sacred Blaze unit. He is actually a great unit and fits Rique's passive well too, but he is a Sacred Blaze unit. If you are watching this to understand whether you should skip Rique or not, there is a good chance you skipped Leon. If you didn't, Leon and Rique are buddies and would be happy together, especially if you can't brain Richard or Renew for some reason. Without Leon though... Okay, let's look at the upcoming units. Patricio isn't really a damage dealer. His 2 times single target will ram the damage cap, but 6 times AoE will actually benefit from Rique's passive, if only Rique had an AoE damage move. He is probably the most likely candidate to replace Rique as a buffer the moment he comes out, because competition is high. Magnolia, even though she fits the bill for Rique's passive, I'm not sure about her. There is a chance she would be too strong for his passive. Her AoE 100% will ram damage cap at every opportunity. Other than that, she is a collab unit, and I heard her banner was a stingy one. There are other spirit units in the future, like Oshka, Nia and EX Xanthos, but that's very far in the future, and it's hard to say how useful Rique will be then. Oshka and EX Xanthos have multi-hits, but they also have insane buffs. Rique is likely to be power creeped by then. Rique's kit is contradictory. He is like jack of all trades and master of none. Rique is a fine spear damage dealer. He really wants an AoE damage move besides his ult, because his other skills are against AoE, but his single target is solid. Rique shield shaves a little, which also supports his passive effect, but it is a standby move basically. He has an AoE 4 times hit priority move, which is also a buff move. I've already talked about it in the shortcomings section. His buffs and debuffs are awkward, I would say. They're all 15%, the debuff is too simple in comparison to what Signa and Honey decks have, and the buffs are always 2 turns long, because you are supposed to break with his priority move and apply them with it. It's even worse that his damage buff is universal, because it can't extend Richard's or Paticia's spear damage buff. Finally, his passive, his selling point. When Patricio comes out, it'd be possible to reach 45% or even 50% attack up with him, Richard and Rique. It would be rather easy to achieve even. In my opinion though, you'd want to take Rique only if you have a spare slot. Like best case scenario, imagine you have some decent boss. One when you absolutely need to put your defenses up to the limit and get all your buffs, and you want to take Rique. You 100% use Renew for regen and defense, Richard and Patricio buff all damage categories to 30% together, Signa debuffs everything and has universal physical res down, Roland Uber debuffs spear resist to 30%, you also need a tank of sorts, Kenry for example also shield shaves, you want Leon for damage and you already have 7 units. You add Rique and you have almost everything covered, except for ultimate attack up, which you'd probably usually get from Premax. Here is my revelation. You probably don't need him. He does too little in comparison to even Isla, who has far better use cases, and some people still recommended to skip him. You decide for yourself though. I laid out all this info specifically for that. Rique is still an okay unit if you meet Richard for example, or don't have any spear damage dealers, just probably not memory travel level.